Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at Lakehead University for our speaker series, Financial Planning for your Children's Future. Your audio and video is automatically disabled by default, and at no time is your video or your computer screen accessible by the moderator or presenters or others for taking part. Also, this is just a reminder that this webinar is going to be recorded. After the presentation, there will be time for Q&A, and if during the presentation you think of a question, you can send me a private message. As we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the original custodians of this land and pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the cultures, and the hopes of Indigenous peoples. I would also like to recognize that our Thunder Bay and Aurelia campuses are on the traditional land of some of this country's Indigenous peoples. In Thunder Bay, Lakehead University resides on the traditional land of the Fort William First Nation, signatory to the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. In Aurelia, Lakehead University resides on the traditional lands of Anishinaabe people and the Rama First Nations. We also acknowledge the history that many nations hold in these areas and look forward to respectful relationships with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in the spirit of reconciliation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the speakers today. Ryan Hogan, he's the TD Wealth Financial Planner and a Senior Financial Planner at TD Wealth Financial Planning. His areas of expertise include retirement planning, estate planning, tax management, investment strategies, and education planning. Ryan is a graduate of Lakehead University's Economic and Political Science programs and has worked with TD Bank for 13 years. Stephen Kokolquin, Senior Financial Advisor, born and raised in Thunder Bay, and is Lakehead University graduate of the Honors Bachelor of Commerce program. He has been with TD Bank for 15 years and started while he was still attending Lakehead. He has focused on financial advice for 10 years, and in his current role as Senior Financial Advisor, he specializes in real estate lending and investing. Finally, Carly Lynch is a financial advisor. Carly is the TD financial advisor for 5 years of banking experience, currently specializing in real estate lending, investments, and day-to-day banking. She started at TD as a part-time teller while completing her HBCom at Lakehead, and now enjoys sharing her knowledge of finance and banking to help improve the financial literacy of others. Take it away, team.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome, Lakehead University alumni. We're so happy to have you with us today. As Amanda said, I'm a Lakehead University alumni myself, and I can definitely say I thoroughly enjoyed all of my years at LU, and I'm just so happy to have you all with us today. Today, here at TD, more than ever, we're here to help, and we're here to help you feel financially confident. So today's financial literacy presentation is going to be focused on planning for your child's future or a new addition to a family. And even with the topic of planning for a child or a new addition to the family, know that a lot of the topics that we'll be discussing today, they really pertain to all goals in life. And with any goals coming, a lot of the benefit of having a financial plan is going to be feeling prepared, feeling confident, and knowing that you can achieve those goals. And that's what we're here to help you to do at TD Bank. So with our agenda today, next slide, we're going to be discussing some of the topics of financial consideration, specifically in the categories of budgeting, investing, insurance, and estate planning, with the spin on welcoming a new child. The average cost of having a child in Canada can be over $250,000, and those financial costs are only going to continue to rise. So now more than ever, having a financial plan is so important, and especially with these difficult times that we're all faced with, I hope everyone joining us today is doing well, and those that are close to them and their loved ones are all safe and healthy, and we can only hope that things will get better. But even in the thick and thin of things, we're here for you, and that just shows that, you know, always having a financial plan in place now more than ever is so important. And know that TD's commitment to you has never wavered. We're always going to be here for you, and that's why we're doing this presentation today. So the topics, just breaking it down into a bit further detail, the budgeting, we'll look at the big picture of what to expect with having a child coming, the pre-arrival, early stage, and later years. The investment category, we'll talk about a general overview of some investment products, specifically the Rdsp, Tfsas, and then other considerations to think about later down the road, like real estate and another registered plan called an Rdsp. Then we will go into some insurance discussion and the topic of estate planning. So again, thank you all for joining us and being a part of this today. And we'll start it off with the first topic of budgeting with my colleague, Ryan.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for having me, everyone. Again, I'm Ryan. I'm the Senior Financial Planner with TD Wealth. And so the first topic that we're going to be covering today is just budgeting for having a child, the costs that are associated with that. Kids are expensive. I think that's the reality. Like Steve had mentioned there, Money Sense has estimated that the average cost of raising a child from birth to age 18 is around $250,000. Again, that's an average. I think some people can do that a lot more. Can spend a lot more than that, and others can do it a lot more frugally and save money where possible. And I'm going to cover off on some of those things today. Breaking that down again, that's somewhere around $13,000 a year, each and every year, adjusted for inflation. Again, that does vary considerably based on sort of what your location is, your lifestyle, the things that you like to do. So this pie chart on this first slide here just kind of gives a breakdown of what those costs can look like. I myself, I have a 5-year-old at home, and in about 3 weeks from now, I'm going to have another little one. And I look at some of these, and for me, like recreation, for example, right now is a lot bigger than 8%, and childcare costs is now decreased a little bit, but that's going to change. So I'm going to go and talk to these pieces a little bit more in detail and base them on sort of the stages, life stages of your child. Sorry, next slide, please. So first one is sort of pre-arrival, before your baby arrives. There's quite a bit to think about in that sense. Again, before your baby arrives, there's a lot of things you need right off the get-go. There's going to be things like a crib, a stroller, change tables, rocking chair, high chair, car seats, clothes, those sorts of things that you've got to sort of have some of these things ready before your child arrives. There's a big upfront cost, and you got to be planning or budgeting accordingly to prepare for those costs. Having a monthly budget in place, so like the first bullet point says there, is very important. So kind of getting an idea, putting these things on paper and planning for what those expenses are going to look like. And then again, the monthly costs thereafter. They give the example here, diapers for the first year is going to cost somewhere around $550. I think that's maybe a low estimate, but again, that's the kind of the expenses that you need to take into consideration. The bank, like TD, for example, we have a great app that called TD MySpend that can kind of track what your expenses are and help you budget a little bit more closely there. Another big one, again, this is another one that's a prime example for me. I've got a new one on the way here that my wife and I were not planning for. Our house, we bought 10 years ago. We bought a fairly modest house, only planning to have one child, and now having two. We are now in the position where we're looking to buy a bigger home because of, again, a bigger family. Also, considerations like a bigger vehicle. That's another one of that's important. You got to have room to have now two car seats in the car. These are all things that you need to take into consideration, and again, just having a little bit of time to budget for those in advance can be very, very important. So getting them down on paper and thinking about those costs and preparing for that in advance is important. Next slide. So again, once your newborn has arrived, again, typically one parent is going to take either what's called maternity leave or paternity leave. Again, they say 15 weeks, and after that you get an additional 40. Works out to be basically your first full year is covered through unemployment insurance, and they title it maternity or paternity leave. So you do have some income coming in from that. Once you're off work there, you typically have up to a maximum of $573 a week is what you'll have coming in from the unemployment insurance, and that's income tested. If your income is $51,300 or more, then that's what you'll receive, and slightly less if your pre-mat leave income was less than that. Some companies will top that up. So dependent upon your current employer, they can give an additional boost for your maternity leave, so they can cover, they can increase that top up, but that varies widely dependent upon the employer. I've seen some employers that have topped up to 80% of your pre-existing salary, and quite a few employers don't top up at all. So that's something that you'll need to discuss or research with your employer first to kind of get an idea of what your income is going to look like throughout that course of that year. You take your mat leave, and again, your income from your job ends. You've got some coverage there from the maternity leave employment insurance, but it's not going to be as much as typically you were earning before. So that's something you need to budget for and plan for and prepare for. The last one there, again, arrival, signing up for daycare. That's another one that I had. You just don't realize how little space there is, and some of the wait lists that there are. So the moment your child is born, or even prior to your child being born, getting them on a wait list for daycare, and then preparing for the cost of daycare. Which next slide there. Thank you. Yeah, so so this one is now budgeting for young children. Daycare costs. This is budgeting for years, basically when your child is ages 1 to 4. Typically, your biggest costs at that time are going to be your childcare, your cost to take care of your child. Should you decide, at least if again either one or both parents have gone back to work and no one's going to stay home, you're going to need to take care of childcare. My experience with that was, they gave the example here of $10,000 a year. My experience here in Thunder Bay, we were paying $60 a day, which worked out to be $300 a week, or $15,000 a year. And that's just for your childcare. That for those 3 years, you need to again have a plan in place to make sure that you've got those kind of expenses covered. Those expenses can again vary widely. Pardon me. Dependent upon where you live. They give the example here again of Toronto being the most expensive at just shy of $1,700 per month, whereas in Montreal it can be less than $200 per month. So that changes based on your location, and also what type of daycare that you choose. There are in-home daycares, and there's more organized formal daycares, and so on and so forth, and the costs for those can again vary widely. You will, during this period of time, also you'll have some other income that'll come in at that time. You'll have typically the Universal Child Care Benefit, UCCB. Again, income tested, dependent upon what your income is. You'll have some income that can come into that, up to a maximum of $1,200 a year, and that can help pay for some of these childcare expenses, but again, typically not all of them. Preschool, daycare, preschool, they can kind of very similar things. So again, more formal preschool versus in-home daycare. Same idea. They both cost quite a bit of money. Once you hit, your child turns typically around 4, now they're into kindergarten, and again you lose those costs at that point in time. The cost of that daycare goes down considerably, which is nice, and hopefully you've got full day daycare, full day kindergarten. So you're watching that. But the other side of that, perfect, thank you. The kindergarten ends at 2:45, and again, your employment probably does not. So there's also considerations for before or typically, again, in my case, it was after school programs. Another just a brief example: after school programs, getting your child in after school care. My assumption that it was going to be very, very simple and straightforward. Found out that being on a wait list for over a year and still not having childcare when my daughter started school for the first time. That's something that you really have to get on very, very early in order to get them accepted into these type of programs. Again, same idea. It can be $30 to $40 a day for after school care from, call it, 3 o'clock until 5 p.m. When you're done your working day. again, having a budget in place is important to consider those costs as well from there. The extracurricular activities, that's one that, again, can vary widely. For myself, I've got, for my daughter, downhill ski lessons, cross-country ski lessons, boulder bear, rock climbing lessons, ballerina lessons, gymnastics lessons, all these various different programs. They cost a lot. They cost a relatively large amount of money. It depends on how active your lifestyle is, and so on and so forth. But making sure you kind of get a sense for what those costs are going to be, and same idea, having a budget in place for those, putting those numbers on paper in advance. The last one is, again, summer camps. Obviously closed right now, hopefully reopening again, but summer camps are a phenomenal resource. Again, yes, you can take some holidays over the summer, which is wonderful, but you typically can't take 2.5, 3 months of holidays. So summer camps can really come into play to have some childcare during the summer. They're also very expensive programs. I know we've had a few of them that we signed up for $600-700 a week that were really great programs, and I can't speak highly enough about them, but they can be very expensive programs as well. So again, taking time to consider those. Later years, I don't know, again, as much about, but I don't have a teenager quite yet, but again, things like cell phones, monthly bills, computers, gaming systems, driving lessons, those costs can certainly ramp up very quickly. Also, I'd even consider adding into this, planning to help your child fund a wedding, for example, helping your child pay for their first down payment of a home. These can be really big expenses, and again, planning in advance to have a budget to create an emergency fund even to cover some of those expenses can be very important. From there, I think one of the biggest expenses is going to be planning for your child's education funds. Again, I'll pass it to my colleague Steve to discuss a little bit more about the investment strategies that can go around education planning there.
Actually, my name's Carly, and I'll actually be talking to you about the RESPs in general. So I am one of the financial advisors here at TD as well. So as Ryan said, the RESP is one of the ways that you can save for education for your children, and that's through the Registered Education Savings Plan. The RESP is a government plan that allows you to put money aside for tuition fees, college trade, registration fees, and other costs that might be associated with your kid going to school. While these investments are put aside, the investment can gain interest, and that interest is not subject to taxes until they are withdrawn from the account. So there are other ways that you can save for your child's education that is not an RESP, and that could be other Tfsas or regular savings accounts to save for a more longer term. However, these are also great options, as Ryan said, for saving for a down payment for your child's first house, if you wanted to help them along with that, or as a gift for their wedding, if that's something that you wanted to do for them. It is important, though, to remember that you need to put yourself first. As much as we all love to help our children, we still have a very finite amount of time before we are going to be retiring ourselves. And so it's important to note that you have to put a reasonable amount away for your child. So you don't want to be putting yourself in a situation where you're not going to be hitting your own retirement goals, whereas putting a large amount aside for your kids for their education. It's also important to note that there is such thing called the sandwich generation in Canada. And the sandwich generation is those adults that are both caring for their aging parents who haven't put enough away for their retirement goals, as well as their children at the same time. So this can cause a lot of financial responsibility put onto these adults and stress them out financially, and make it almost impossible for them to reach their own goals. So I'm going to go a little bit more into the benefits of an RESP. So why would you want to invest into an RESP? And that's because the government will actually provide you with some grant money. So this first bullet point here shows the Canada Education Savings Grant, also known as the Basic Grant, provides a 20% contribution up to your $2,500 per year contribution per child. So this results in $500 in grant money annually given to you from the government for putting $2,500 into an RESP each year. There is a lifetime limit of this of $7,200 for each child, or a maximum contribution of $50,000 on your part per RESP. So, of course, if you're not able to contribute the full amount, because $2,500 a year tends to be about $208 a month, which can be a significant amount if you're, say, a single family or you don't have a large income coming in. You can actually catch up on later years, in future years, on past years that you didn't reach the maximum, and you can get up to additional $500 in grants per year until you catch up on the previous grants. The contributions that you do put into an RESP are not tax deductible. So that means, unlike an RSP where you can have a tax deduction, there isn't going to be any effect on your income tax when you contribute to an RESP. This also allows it to be utilized by grandparents and other family members that want to open up an RESP for a child, nephew and niece, a grandson or granddaughter, and allows them to also take advantage of that. Certain low-income contributors can also benefit from other grants and incentives, such as the Canada Learning Bond, as well as there are additional grants that can be given based on income levels. When you do have your child go to school, so once they actually get enrolled into a post-secondary education program, such as college, trades, or university, they have the ability to take the funds out, including the grant money, to go towards those education costs. So the grants and the investment money that's invested in the plan does get invested tax-free until it's taken out, but on the withdrawal, it is taxable to the beneficiary or the child. But this helps also protect the parent from having additional taxes, as well as the kid will most likely not be making a lot of money or be taxed, if anything, depending on the level of the withdrawal. So different tax rules really do apply depending on what the circumstances are when they actually do go to school. So going into the different grant types, depending on where you live in Canada, there's some different grants that will be available to you. So as I previously had mentioned, the Basic Education Savings Grant is that 20% of your annual contribution to a maximum of a $500 grant per year. The Canada Learning Bond is usually for lower income earners who can get a bond that can be up to $2,000 annually for you, or sorry, not $2,000 annually, $2,000 in total of a lifetime for your child. In BC, there's the BCTSG, which is the British Columbia Education and Training Savings Grant, which can be $1,200 to an eligible child between ages 6 and 9. The Basic Quebec Education Savings Incentive is for people residing in Quebec to start saving early and incentivize that, as well as the increased Quebec Education Savings Incentive, where you can earn additional 10% on contributions up to $500 in grants. So now I'm going to be passing it off to Steve to talk to you about tax-free savings accounts.
Thank you, Carly. And thank you, Ryan, for your great budgeting information as well. And so as Carly had just described in great detail, the features and benefits of an RESP, a Registered Education Savings Plan, just keep in mind that that's only one investment vehicle or one registered program that you can use when you're planning for your child. And specifically, just be aware that the RESP, hence the name Registered Education Savings Plan, is just going to be focused on their education. Sometimes parents want to save, like Ryan had said, for budgeting for other things like a wedding present, help them put a down payment on their first home later down the road, buy their first car when they turn 17, 16, you know, lots of other investment goals, and they don't necessarily fall into post-secondary education program. So you could use other investment programs to help you with these goals. Another great investment vehicle is the tax-free savings account, the Tfsa. And I'm a huge fan of the Tfsa personally myself. I think everybody should use the Tfsa to their maximum advantage. And what it is another registered program with the CRA where you can make contributions up to an annual limit. And there's a carry forward that if you haven't used previous annual limits, you can continue to carry forward those into future years, where you can put money into a Tfsa and save or invest in there, and the income or the growth that your investments earn is not going to be taxable. So when you withdraw the funds, you're not going to be hit with tax. Say you put 6,000 in, which was the limit for this year, and then you invest it, and then in 3 years you take it out and it's worth 6,500. That $500 worth of growth, normally if it wasn't in a Tfsa, you would have to pay tax on that. But with it being in a Tfsa, you don't have to. So the name Tfsa can be a little bit deceiving sometimes. It's not just a savings account. It can be used as an investment vehicle for a number of different investment choices within the plan. And it could be used for anything, very flexible. You could use that without any regulations to have to jump through of proving that they're in school or what it's for. You could use it to give your child a gift. And just be aware that you are able to name a beneficiary on your Tfsa. That's another benefit. But for the younger ones, you have to be 18 years or age majority once your Tfsa room begins to start. And for those of us who were born before 1991, where the Tfsa was first introduced in 2009, you can continue now to have up to carrying forward unused years worth of room. It's accumulated up to 75,500 in a Tfsa that one can have contributed now. And that goes up every year. There's an annual limit. This year it was kept at 6,000, just like it was in 2020. And those limits have varied year to year. So I would just be mindful that your room of when you can start to contribute into a Tfsa, when your contribution room begins, starts from when you turned 18, or if you were already age majority when the program was introduced, and that was in 2009, that's when you'd have the maximum 75.5 that I mentioned. And when you withdraw from a Tfsa, you can put the money back in, which is awesome. It's not that the room is lost forever. You can recontribute it, but just being mindful of contributing in the next year. So this is getting into those kind of bigger things of like those gifts or bigger costs to factor in for the children once they get a little older. Say like you're in a financial position that you planned for, that you can help them to buy their first house. How great would that be? So it's getting more into the topic of real estate, and that's definitely a big investment. So parents, if they're in a financial position to be able to gift their children part of their down payment, the gifts have to be non-repayable. It can't be a loan, unless if you were to seek legal advice, you could do it in a form of a loan way that the child has to repay you. But just be careful of that, because it can become part of a division if the child is in a relationship and they have a partner. So we always suggest getting legal advice when it comes to that. But typically a gift would be just a non-repayable gift. The parent may be able to co-sign, which is common. We see that lots. If they're in a position where their credit and their income is stable and they're able to help their child out when the child is still getting on their feet with their first job or saving up and not quite ready to qualify on their own for the mortgage, being able to co-sign. But just know that the parent as a co-signer is going to be on the property title. And so therefore they'll be an owner of the property with the child and whoever else is on the house and on the mortgage. And so there are capital gains that could be potentially an impact on the growth of the asset value over time if there was a sale. And then the last bullet there, this would be a pretty great position to be in if a parent was able to purchase a child a house. So that would be, again, like super great financial position to be in. Not that you see that all the time, but if they have the resources to be able to just literally buy the child the house, they could do that. And it could be done smartly, again, with legal advice, using a family trust and doing it in such a way that they know that it is in the child's name eventually. That's the kind of the key point there on the capital gains aspect. So it's not really the parents' house that they're going to pay tax on, but they're buying it in advance, and then with the proper legal advice, they can have it set up for the child. Again, you know, not everybody, we try to do the best we can for our loved ones, and we try to help budget and plan as much as we can, but not everybody is going to be able to buy their kid a house. But hey, that's why we want to help you any way we can, right? And another registered program to be aware about is called an RDSP. So an RDSP stands for Registered Disability Savings Plan. This is another government registered investment vehicle. And now this one is only for a beneficiary, or it could be if you yourself were eligible for a disability tax credit, meaning that there's an eligible disability. It's a government incentive where parents of the disabled child, or the person who is disabled themselves, if they're, you know, age of majority and capable on their own, they are having an incentive provided to them to build their own pension plan with contributions that can be matched. Sometimes it depends on income, but sometimes up to 300% of government grant matching. And this is not specific to education. This isn't specific to, you know, helping the child for one, you know, specific need. It's really to build them income for later years, because these disabled people may not be able to work and earn the same livelihood that someone who isn't disabled might over their working career life. So an RDSP is another plan if it's eligible. And we didn't really talk about RSPs in this one too much, but just as kind of a interesting fact or a myth buster, does anyone know the difference between an RSP and an RRSP? This is something that comes up a lot. It's actually a cause of confusion sometimes, but I just wanted to highlight that, you know what, you guys, they're the exact same thing. There's no difference between an RSP and an RRSP. It just stands for Registered Retirement Savings Plan. And in our industry, we just use RSP because it's easier. But technically the term, like definition wise from CRA, is Registered Retirement Savings Plan, but we just call it Retirement Savings Plan. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's a little bit more for retirement planning for your own self personally. And then we can go on to the next slide from there.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So everything we've talked about so far has been based around, again, budgeting and planning for the things that you expect. So planning for, you know, the childcare costs, planning for education costs, buying a home, those sorts of things. These are all the things that we plan to happen. It is equally, if not more important, to plan for the things that you don't expect to happen. So that's really where looking into and discussing with a qualified professional about insurance comes into play. There's many different types of insurance, and what's right for you is not right for maybe the you know, your friends or people around you. And that's why, again, getting good solid advice in this area is important. So just a brief overview of insurance again. First and foremost, life insurance. So in the event that something happens to you or your partner, for example, making sure that your kids are financially taken care of, making sure that your spouses can, if that's the case, is taken care of in that situation. This type of insurance, typically premiums are low when you're younger, and again can ensure just provide care in the event that, again, that you actually pass away. They say here as well, before pregnancy, applying and getting insurance before again you become pregnant can be beneficial in the sense that the healthcare costs can arise and issues can arise during pregnancy. It's more important to have insurance prior to that point. There's also other insurance products, term insurance, critical illness insurance, and disability insurance. These are all insurance that cover specific perils. So things like term insurance, you can say, you know what, I want to be covered for the rest of my career, for example. So I want, if I've got approximately 20 more years left of work, I want to be covered. You might have something like that through employment insurance, but term insurance through an outside company covers you for a specific period of time. Critical illness insurance, important as well. So again, not everyone, the situation insurance might not just cover just in the event that you unfortunately untimely pass away. It might be things like a heart attack, a stroke, life-threatening cancer. There's all sorts of different things that can potentially come up. there's various different insurance products based around critical illness in the event that something like that happens to you. Income replacement, being able to, you expect to be able to earn your current salary for the rest of your working years, but if some sort of illness prevents you from doing so, critical illness insurance can really come into play to replace your income or replace some of your earning ability over the coming years. Disability insurance, very similar, but applied differently. So in the event that you're disabled and unable to earn the income that you're previously earning, disability insurance can also come into play to make payments to things like your mortgage, paying your bills, so on and so forth. Equally important. So again, talking about insurance with a qualified representative or somebody like a certified financial planner is a very important thing in planning for your family's well-being over the course of your lifetime, especially with young children. Sorry, next slide. It's there. And so the last of our financial planning considerations that we're discussing today is estate planning. Again, it can be an uncomfortable conversation, and a lot of people, especially with younger children, you think, oh, estate planning, that's a long way away. I'm not worried about it right now. The number one piece of advice that I give to a lot of my clients is just have a will in place. Make sure that you've got a will that includes powers of attorney for healthcare and financial matters. Cannot stress that enough. The complexity of dealing with an estate, a terrible situation if somebody passes away untimely, is difficult enough as it is. Not having a will during that period of time makes it so much more challenging and can make for a really brutal situation. So again, having a will in place is very important. Making sure that you designate your beneficiaries in that will, making sure that your assets are divided up the way that you want them to be, is very important. You can also at the same time as creating a will, you can look at things like trusts. So trusts are products where you can designate the control of those assets after you've passed away to ensure that if a minor is unable to make decisions for themselves, or you want to ensure that they get access to funds over a certain period of time, trusts can really come into play to help out with that. And the last one is, again, living wills. Sorry, the next slide, please. Again, advanced directives, living wills, these are things that, again, in the event that you're incapacitated or unable, these are sort of end of life care instructions. They can be included in sort of that, included in that same process. They're equally as important. Again, that's where, again, including things like power of attorney and for personal care, power of attorney for property. So if you're incapacitated in some way where you cannot make decisions for yourself, if you're, terrible things, if you're in a coma or something like that, and you need someone to pay your bills, you need someone to make decisions based on your assets, what's in your best interest, having designated someone you trust as a power of attorney or for personal care or for property can be very important. And that's where, again, talking to a qualified representative to discuss these things is equally important. That's all I had from my side of things there. So I'll pass it back to Amanda there.
Thank you, guys. This was a great presentation. Very informative. You answered a lot of questions, and you are so right in that you never think these things are going to happen to you, and you just need to be prepared. You have a plan, and the plan is always being altered. So thank you for this. There are questions coming in like crazy, so I'll just turn to them, and then whoever's most appropriate to respond to them, go for it. Sure. Okay, so for the GESG, is the government grant done automatically if you contribute $2,500 annually, or do you need to apply?
So it is automatically done. We apply for the grant application when you open up the RESP. So going forward, once that original RESP is opened, every time you do a contribution into the RESP, the grant money is usually credited to the account within a 4 to 8 week period afterwards.
Okay, perfect. Does TD take care of receipt of the government RESP incentives in both QESI Quebec and CESG? If so, how long does it usually take to receive the following deposit?
So I believe that would be very similar to the other question. So depending on the province in which you are located when you open up an RESP. So for myself, I'm located in Ontario, so we wouldn't be applying for any BC grants or Quebec grants. However, if you are located in Quebec or BC, when you open up those plans, you will have the opportunity to apply for those additional grants when you set your RESP originally.
And how long does it take to deposit?
So usually the same, about 4 to 8 weeks after your original deposit was put in.
Okay.
So they
great.
automatically get credited to the account.
Perfect. Is there a limit on the number of RESP accounts for one child? So can a parent or two sets of grandparents apply?
So there isn't a set amount of RESPs that can be for a child, but say if the parents open up an RESP, the grandparents could also open up an RESP for that child as well.
And would the government give that 500 to each person?
That is a good question. Ryan, do you know the answer to that one?
Yeah, so again, it's similar to Tfsa or Rsp. You can open up as many RESPs as you want. You can have as many as you like, but the grant is based on the beneficiary there. The grant is only available to that beneficiary. So it's a maximum of, again, that $500 per year. So you can have as many as you like, but you can still only contribute that $2,500 cumulatively between all the accounts is what's going to attract that government grant. You can also collect up to a maximum of, you can put in $2,500 from a previous year that you have not contributed towards, and you can collect an additional $500 in government grant for previous years if you haven't contributed for that child in those years.
Okay, good to know. I guess what's your best advice? One piece, you would want to teach your child about money?
Great question. Yeah, so I can speak to this one. I think I spend a lot of time chatting with my daughter. Right now, she's, we're counting pennies, and she's saving up in her savings account. She wants to buy herself a new house and a chameleon and all sorts of weird things that she's working on right now at age 5. But the thing that I stress with my daughter at the age that she's at right now is having sort of 2 savings accounts. And so one is for this is sort of the near-term savings. These are the things that you're looking for, in the next year that you really want. You want for, I buy her a new bike, but things that she'd like to buy for herself. So she's saving up for smaller things. She wants to buy a cat leash to take her cat outside, which we're discussing right now. But then a second savings account where we take a little bit of her, we give her $5 a week for allowance, and setting that aside, a part of that into her longer term savings. And that's going to be for the things like, again, building up so that when she turns 15, she can buy herself her first car, or if she really wants a cell phone at age 12, let's say, she can afford to do so. So that's the thing I'm sort of stressing with my daughter at this point in time. Same idea, could be very, very different, but dependent upon the age of your child. If you got a little bit older children, if you're in, if you're 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth, you can focus on just teaching them to save and plan for their own future. So you can say, in 8 years from now, you'll probably be moving out or going to school and things like that. You're going to want to get out and travel. I know when I hit 20, I travel all over the world. Save up a travel fund and make sure that you've got those, and having that conversation early, I think, is very, very important.
It's a good point. In general, people just say you should save, but what does that mean? So having the 2 separate accounts is a really good way to teach a, especially 5-year-old, what that means. So good point. Should parents have a separate emergency child fund?
Yeah, I can tackle that one. Yeah, I think that is very important. I look at myself the same idea. I have an account that's just sort of for I put money away in it with sort of the notion in mind that it's going to be for helping to again pay for a down payment on a home, helping to pay for a wedding, so on and so forth. It's considered also at the same time an emergency fund. So if some kind of emergency expense comes along for my daughter, my future daughter, same idea. I'm gonna use funds from that particular account to do so. There are, when you're planning for, again, back to that budgeting piece, there's a lot of components and aspects to it that you just don't know until they arrive, these things, and sort of looking ahead and knowing that you're going to have some of these expenses, being able to build up a fund to have assets to draw from when those times comes makes life a lot easier. And so that just goes back to that budgeting piece and having that emergency fund in place for that.
Absolutely. You spoke about wills. Is a handwritten will valid?
Handwritten will is valid. You want to have it witnessed by someone, typically not a family member. You'd like to have it witnessed and signed off by a witness. My recommendation with that is fairly straightforward. You don't want to end up in a situation where like somebody could potentially be contesting a will, and a handwritten will could be potentially more open to being contested. Depends on your circumstances. My advice on that is the cost to pay a lawyer is well worth it to have their professional advice. You're really, when you're writing that will, there's aspects to it that you just may not think about, or the ones that you download online. You may not, they may not be inclusive enough, or they may not cover all the different aspects. Getting that professional advice is really what you're paying a lawyer to create that will for, and I think that's money well spent is the easiest way to say it. I think getting that professional advice is very, very important.
Absolutely. This is a great question too. What's your advice for late investors into RESPs, someone that has 2 to 5 years for their kid about to go to school?
Yeah, I can. Same thing as I had just mentioned there. I do this all the time with clients of mine that want to get in at the final years. So again, there are some rules with RESPs with regards to how much you can actually put into them in the later years. But for example, if you have 5 years before school, then really what you should be aiming to do is if possible, aiming to put in $5,000 per child. So that's that $2,500 for that particular calendar year that you're currently in, and then an additional $2,500 for any previous year that you've missed. And so that's going to attract $1,000 per child of government grant up until they're no longer eligible. And that eligibility, you can qualify right until age 16 and get all that government grant. Age 17 is the tricky one where you need to have contributed. You need to have made contributions in the previous 2 years in order to qualify to attract the government grant in that age 17 year. That's a little bit more different if you're starting, if the kid's already 17, then you really unfortunately can't qualify for any of that grant. But the key number there is looking to contribute around $5,000 per child to maximize that government grant portion.
So the government gives you $500 per $2,500. It's not capped at 500.
20% of your contribution per year, up to a maximum of $2,500, and then as well you can contribute from a previous year, and any previous year that you haven't contributed in. So they typically go right back to age 0. You're contributing, say the child is 14 years old, you're contributing for $2,500 for age 14. You're also at the same time contributing $2,500 for age 0, and subsequently now you're putting in $5,000 in that particular one calendar year, and you're going to get 20% of that $2,500, which is $500 for age 14, and then an additional $500 for the age 0 that you missed.
And Ryan, I'm just going to add on to that. If you do end up contributing more than $2,500 in a year, you're not going to receive any grant money on that extra contribution. It's going to be considered an unassisted contribution, and it's not going to carry forward to any other years. You're just not going to receive grant money on that contribution above the $2,500 unless you're backdating that one previous year that Ryan just said. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for clarifying. If you're living overseas for a period of time, can you still contribute to these programs, the TFSAs and the GESGs?
The TFSA, you can, as long as you're a Canadian resident, you have a valid social insurance number, then you can still use the tax-free savings account. So if someone were to travel abroad or relocate like on a non-permanent basis, they would still be able to use a TFSA as long as they still have their valid Canadian social insurance number.
Okay.
And then, yeah, for Canada Education Savings Grants, that's the 20% that they match on contributions into an RESP. That would be kind of the same thing where it's a Canadian resident who's saving towards their child's or dependent's education, and they would have to be in Canada earning income. So if they were to relocate, as long as their SIN number is still valid, they should still be okay to contribute and take advantage of the program and the government matching.
Perfect. Next question, should someone make a financial plan for parental leave?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I can answer that, and I would say, yeah, I think that's important. I don't know if you necessarily need a specific plan around one plan for parental, but that should be part of your overall financial plan. Is just taking into consideration that if you're going to be off for 12 months or even a year and a half, which you can do, your income is going to be reduced during that period of time. So during your maternity or paternity leave, when you're taking that time off, you need to understand that, again, you're still responsible for your mortgage payments or your car payment if you have them, and also you've got a new child with the new child care costs. You're going to have those costs, the new costs that are coming in that are associated with that. Having a plan in place to consider and to make sure that you've got sufficient assets or sufficient income to cover those expenses is vitally important. That's something that's very important to consider before even having a child. I think is something to really think about. So I would say, yeah, absolutely, you should have a plan in place for that.
Perfect. And we'll take one more question. And for all those who have any more remaining questions, we can definitely take those and submit those later on, but just to be cautious of the time. So the education, you said caps at $2,500. Does this amount, and you get the 500 additional, does this amount ever change over time in years to come? Have you seen that?
No, it's been 2,500 for quite some time. I don't expect that will change anytime soon. I doubt that they're going to make. I mean, it's always possible that the government can decide to make changes to the program, but I wouldn't expect that there's going to be any changes anytime soon. And as in my career, that's what it's always been. Again, like Carly had mentioned earlier, there you can contribute considerably more than the 2,500. When I make recommendations to my clients, I recommend specifically just to focus on putting that 2,500 or the also additionally 2,500 from a previous year, just because the reason you're putting money into an RESP is to attract that government grant, is to save for that your child's education. Anything beyond that, again, same idea. You can save in a tax-free savings account, for example, and draw money out of there to help pay for education as well, if you want to, beyond that the maximum of what the government is granting you.
Okay, perfect. Unless you guys have any more last minute comments, we want to thank you so much for coming here today and providing all these lessons and new learnings on this topic for everyone. So thank you so much.